Hey everybody, it's James Vagley here. Welcome to another episode of the MBA podcast. And this one is exciting for a couple of reasons. It's episode 199. So that means 200 is right around the double century. It's right around the corner. And the second one is it's a really interesting, valuable question that we want and discussion that we want to have because it's ridiculously important. You know, the more years of experience and the more brokers we have helped under our belt, the more this topic that we're going to talk about right now comes to light. Ash, for a start, before we get into the topic, how are you today?
Never better, James. Thank you for asking. What about you?
No, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And listeners, you've obviously clicked on this episode already. You know what we're about today. The question is to build or not to build. Now, it is kind of a forgotten question in mortgage broking and business. And we're talking about team, building team, to build or not to build a team, to build or not to build a business, right? This month we're talking all about build team, which is a key component of our mortgage business blueprint. And I guess the concept, listeners, today is effectively that we see a lot of brokers starting to build a team because they're under pressure, they're under the pump, they've got a lot of demand for what they do. And they see others building team and they just think, well, that's what I've got to do. I'm busy, I can't keep up with the work, better build a team. Or I see all my colleagues doing it. I guess that's what you do is you've got to build a support team around you, right? But what we see happen a lot, and this probably resonates with you, Ash. I know you talk about the term Frankenstein's monster a lot in the workshops we've run over the years, in that a lot of brokers seem to hire and expand and, oh, let's add a broker and we'll add some process and we'll build out this team. And they end up building this monster that often is very stressful and makes them less money than if they just stayed by themselves. So I think far too many brokers and business owners are forgetting a fundamental question at the very beginning. Should I even build a team? Should I even build a business? And it all, of course, stems from the fundamental question: what's the result you want, and what's the fastest way to get you to that result? So, where do you want to kick off this one, Ash? The
Well,
complex topic.
this is like the vital organ in the machine, right? Like this is the heart. This is what drives everything, almost, right? So it is almost the singular most important fundamental question: is why am I doing this? It's not an existential question. It's not a mysterious question. It's like, where are you heading with this? And I think, James, to get a little bit into it, a lot of brokers get in the industry for freedom, to make a good living, to be free of a boss or a corporate environment. And it's an opportunity to do something they enjoy, they're good at, make money, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's a sales job, or it's being self-employed, right? So we're at this really sort of juncture in the industry that I think it's really shifting. And that this is the decision that's facing pretty much everybody, which is, are you wanting to build a business or are you doing this just to make a good income? Right? So and this is what faces everybody. And I would challenge everybody listening to this episode or watching it to ask yourself that question, have that conversation with yourself and your advisors. Am I doing this to make a good living, or am I doing this to build a business? Then at the back of both of those questions is, well, why? Right? If you're doing it for the money, why are you putting yourself through the stress of hiring a team and all of those things? Why not just get a job working for somebody else where you can be released to do a lot of what you're really good at, which is find customer, win customer, find customer. You can make 200 or 300 grand a year in someone else's business doing that, right? So that would be one question. On the other side is, no, I'm building a business because I can blank. What is it that lies behind your desire to hire people, grow bigger? Is it freedom? Is it legacy? Is it being able to separate away from the business and have breaks and time? And even below that, though, James, I really believe that there is a fundamental question, and that is, but what is your purpose? Where are you heading with this? Like, who's driving this ship and where are you driving it? Or who's driving this vehicle and where are you driving it? I had a conversation with a broker the other day. Been in the industry a long time, a successful guy in as far as volume. And just in the middle of our discussion, he goes to me, you know what? He said, I've just about had enough of hiring people and trying to make it work. I think I just want to go back to being a one-man band and making a couple of $100,000 a year writing loans. I could do that with one arm behind my back, with less hours and less stress. And I said, well, that's a good conversation to have, right? Because it's, look, it starts to flush out into the open why you're doing it. Now there's more to that story, but it was an interesting reflection. And I would suggest, James, to you and every listener, do you have that conversation with yourself? I say every broker has it at some point, and that is, why am I doing this? Why don't I just go back to writing loans and keeping all the money for myself?
Exactly. And there's so many ways places we could go with this discussion, right? Like what you were alluding to, we ran a session at our relatively recent event for our members, and we talked about this concept of the fact that most people just go for more. Like, more sounds good. You mentioned the words like, what do you want, and the why and purpose, and most people don't know. Like, they've never thought about it. So the default is just, well, more. Like, I reckon most of our listeners, you'd be in the same boat. Like, what do you want? Most would come back and say more. In one way, they would say more. I want to build a bigger business. I want to make it easier. I want to settle more loans. I want to make more money. More. But no one knows why. And that's why I think it's incredibly valuable to have this conversation. Because if you start with the why, well, what life do you want? How much does it cost to have that life? And then, okay, well, how do I build a business that makes me that amount of money in the easiest and fastest way possible? And if you can achieve that ideal life with yourself and a couple of VAs, for example, and you do that for X years, make a certain amount of money, invest the rest, sell the trail book, retire, why would you build a business? That's the fundamental question, Ash. And I have another M. Maybe we can come up with 3 M's. You know what I'm like with my M's. So I got one. The first M is more. The second M is middle. The middle ground sucks most of the time. For example, we've seen a lot of broking businesses over the years, Ash, haven't we? And we kind of know that the middle ground kind of sucks a lot of the time. So what we mean by that, listeners, is when you're a solo operator, and I'll include solo operator with a few staff as relatively solo, it's yourself and or 2 or 3 support staff. That's pretty solo. Once you start to grow, there's this kind of middle ground that involves a lot extra time, a lot extra stress, a lot of extra moving parts, but you don't make any more money. So you go from yourself and a few support staff, suddenly you've got the next in the middle. So I've got 3 brokers, I've got 6 support staff, I've got an office now. People are coming in and out. That person didn't work out. This didn't work out. I've got an office manager, et cetera, et cetera. This middle ground often ends up not making the broker any more money, and the settlements aren't really showing up. So it's kind of like you have to get beyond the middle to a size that's actually going to be sustainable and profitable. Otherwise, in a lot of instances, I don't want to have a black and white necessarily discussion because it can work in the middle, but in a lot of instances, the middle isn't worth it. You may as well stay small, or you have to go big enough to make it now worthwhile. Does that make sense, eh?
Oh, crystal clear sense, James. And look, the middle ground is sort of the quicksand, right? You either need to be progressing through it or moving back. But I think it's difficult to stay in the middle ground. I think you probably could in the past, but I think the industry is really moving ahead. I published an article a few months ago in one of the industry mags talking about, the era of the super broker, or the era of consolidation, which is upon us. There's a lot of reasons for that, compliance, legislation, costs, time it takes to write loans, a whole bunch of other things that are meaning that you're either a business wanting to get really big, or you're positioning yourself to be a fish to be eaten by the bigger business. There's not many in
Yep.
the middle, right? So the middle ground is starting to shrink. It's a progression point, but a lot of those middle ground businesses are looking to consolidate together to form one big business. That's merger and acquisition type stuff. So you're
Yep.
quite right. And I think if you're out there listening to this going, well, I'm sort of in that middle ground and I'm struggling away and I'm hiring people, firing people, trying to work it out, not making a lot of money, but at least I'm building a business. Well, are you? And why? And are you creating value? And I use that term a lot. Are you creating transferable value in your business? That's what I call a business that somebody else would want to
Mm.
buy and pay top dollar for. That's a business. Just saying you're building a business doesn't mean it's a business.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
challenge everybody to think about that and think about, well, where do I fit here? You know, is it about positioning myself to be absorbed and bought by another business, or do I have ambition and I want to compete and become one of those bigger businesses, right? Because that sort of era where you could be a small broker with 2 or 3 staff, writing 5, 6, 7, 8 mil a month, but not making all the money yourself, having to pay team, and not really being able to get away from the business. I think, well, you know, unless you're positioning that to the next step, why are you doing it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's where a lot go wrong is they just don't, number one, know what they want, and then they don't know what the model, the business model is to actually achieve that. And we're seeing a lot of inefficiencies happen because of it. I thought of a third M, Ash, listeners,
Excellent.
thought of a third M. So, and these are M's that are not necessarily good things, as we said. So the first M was more, and the default to just wanting more for the sake of more. That's dumb. It's dumb. You'll end up working harder and longer and putting more stress and putting your life on hold, chasing more. So we don't want that. Instead, we want to define what we want. So more. Second one was middle. Don't get trapped in the middle where you've built something and you feel like you're building a business, but you're actually making less or no money and taking on all the risk and stress. Third one is manager. So I was just thinking about this, Ash. A lot of brokers, be honest with yourself, you might not be a good manager. You might not be a good leader. You might love just working with clients and you're amazing at wheeling and dealing and you can have your support team and you work really well. But do you want to transition into managing and leading a team? Like most don't. And so when you're thinking about, well, do I build or not build? Okay, number one, it's what sort of life do I want, and how am I going to build it? How do I get that amount of money? But the other concept we taught our members recently, you remember, Ash, was we sort of went, okay, so what do you want? But the other flip side of that is, what are you prepared to do? And if someone sits there and goes, well, I want this, but I'm not prepared to manage a big team of people, then that's a big red flag, right? To build or not to build, if you're not willing to dedicate a lot of energy and resources and time to building out an amazing team, like you might want a particular financial outcome, but that's a bad thing to do if you're not willing to do the work required. So there's a lot of questions that should be asked before people embark on building a team in a real business.
Well, it's one of the reasons we run this podcast, James, is because we want to trigger your thinking. We want to spur you into different ways of looking at things and thinking about things and going down pathways you hadn't previously been. And it also speaks to the importance of, how vital it is to have a mentor, coach, advisor, somebody in your corner to talk about these things with. I find this almost, it's right up there in the top 3 most important things of all the people that I've worked with for many years, James, is yes, there's wisdom, there's knowledge, there's this, there's that, there's system and process and methodology, which is all important. But right up there near the top of the list is being able to talk to someone and share my ideas and get them out of my head is highly valuable in of itself. So I would suggest if you're listening to this going, yeah, it sort of makes sense. And, you know, I need to do something about that. It's no good just spinning it around in your own head, right? You need to be able to sit with someone, mud map it out, mind map it out, and start to congeal this together into a path that makes sense to you. And it might mean you go, you know what? I was building a business and I thought that was for me, but you know what? I don't actually like managing people. I'm great with customers. I don't actually like managing people. Well, why are you forcing yourself to do it? Why, why do that? You know, as you
Yeah.
said, either find a way to hire someone that sits between you and the team. I call that well, you call it, that could be a manager, but that's the integrator, that sort of person who sits between you and everything else. Or perhaps go the other direction, which is just be a lone writer and be very good at it and make a good living, build up a good trail book. And your strategy is, you know what? I'm going to get my trail book to a certain size and then I'm just going to sell it for the most I can get. Then I'm out. Like, you know, it still surprises me to this day how few brokers can put in words where they're heading with their business. Where you actually, what's the end game? I don't have one. Well, of course you do. You must have, right? Everybody exit their business at some point. Like, unless you plan on living forever, at some point, this business is going to be sold, liquidated, handed over. Something's going to happen. So why are you not planning way ahead for that? And that brings it back to this fundamental question: build or not build? Like, to me, you build a team and a business because it's the logical pathway to that destination. And so I think
100%.
you're so true. So many people are building businesses, but don't really know why.
Well, the conversation's not had often enough, and that's why hopefully we're starting it. And, you know, brokers, whether you're already working with an advisor or coach, or, you know, if you're not, you should be. But yeah, you know, where your focus is super important, who you listen to. So if you're there, let's say you knock on a coach's door and you say, I want to write $100 million a year. And that coach goes, great, I wrote a couple $100 million a year. I'll show you how I did it. Oh, that's all well and good. But could that person and yourself be leading you down a path of implosion if you didn't actually ask the fundamental question up front? Yeah, but why do you want to write $100 million a year? And what skills are you good at and what skills are you not good at? So I think when assessing the future of your business, you know, what direction you go with, it's imperative to have somebody challenge what you're saying you want. Like, what do you want? Why do you want it? Great. Let's double check that that's true, and then go, right, what's the fastest way to get there, as opposed to just picking an arbitrary goal out of thin air, which unfortunately is like, this is going to be my challenge, Ash, for every listener. Like, this is maybe going to be part of my summary, is I challenge every listener to sit down and instead, I want you to rip up the goal in your mind, or if you've written it down, that says, I want to write 20 mil a month, or I want to write 100 mil a year. I want to be $1 billion broker, whatever it happens. Scrap that sort of arbitrary number and instead sit down for 30 minutes and detail what your ideal life looks like. You know, what are you doing each day? How often do you go on holidays? When do you wake up? What are you doing throughout the day? Who are you doing it with? Think about your ideal day, week, month, year, and then price it up. How much does that cost you after tax? And then go, right, how do I make that amount of money through being in the mortgage business in the easiest, fastest way possible? Now, I don't say easy and fast as it's a bad rap, Ash. I mean, I'm still meaning be amazing at what you do, amazing client outcomes. We're not talking about cheap and nasty. I'm just talking about, if you want to make 300 grand a year and that's your number that gives you the life that you want, well, how can you make that amount of money with the least number of moving parts? You know, like, what's your business model to achieve that? Settle this many loans. Okay, to settle that many loans, I need this model and team. This is how much I'm going to pay them. That's what I'm gunning for, as opposed to just, I want to be the best in the country and I want to write $100 million too, and I want to win the next big award. Who cares? You know, it's time for our listeners, I think, to all get a little bit selfish and go, what do I want? And it doesn't matter what anybody else wants.
Well,
because, yeah.
less than 5% of the industry writes more than 5 million a month consistently, right? So you've got to ask yourself, yes, it's aspirationally to put yourself in the top 5%. Now, I don't know whether this is a snapshot in time that might change, but I feel as though the pursuit of more is leading people down the garden path, because to get to that level, there's certain sacrifices, certain choices, certain investments, certain things you have to do to get there, right? And I think this is where the vast majority of brokers just run into a brick wall thinking, I'm just going to work hard, I'm going to get some advice, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and all of a sudden I'm going to be super successful. If it was that easy, there'd be more than 5% of the industry writing more than 60 mil a year, right? That's just the facts. The facts don't lie. So that says to me that fundamentally a lot of brokers should probably reassess why they're doing it, right? And then understand where do I need to be in order to best maximize my skills and where I'm heading. Is it running a small business with a couple of people, or is it being a broker contracted to another business where they provide all the infrastructure and I just see client, win client, see client, win client, do what you love. Well, most brokers will tell you that, right, James? What's the one thing you love? Seeing customers, solving their problems, winning the business. Everything else, take it away from me. But that bit, I want to, right?
Yeah. Oh, and every broker is different. And we know out of all our thousands of listeners, I know that you're all different too, right? And, there'd be a little bit of like, not kind of like wake up calls for so many of our listeners to go, you could be an incredible front person that can build partnerships and, talk underwater and sell ice to Eskimos, but you can't organize yourself out of a paper bag, right? And you're not very detailed, you're hopeless with processing, but you can bring in the business left, right, and center. A lot of people don't realize their strengths and their weaknesses, and you've got people that are incredible stage people that are trying to build businesses, and there is no way in hell they should be doing that. I know for a fact. And then there's a ton of amazing brokers that are amazing technicians, incredible with numbers and policy and process, but they can't go out and talk to people and build relationships to save their life. So, knowing what you're great at is so valuable, because there's a lot of square pegs in round holes and people doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. And not just because of the build or not to build, because this middle ground is tricky, blah, blah, blah. It could be putting that person into a situation that they're not very good at, and they could achieve the outcome in other ways. So it's so dynamic, this conversation, Ash. Like we've got these thinking exercises, we've got calculators and modeling devices that we can take people through to make sure that they're heading down the right path. And it's not something that we can probably teach in just 20 minutes, but we can certainly hope to make our listeners aware of the importance of asking fundamental questions like, to build or not to build? Should I be doing this? What's the easiest way to achieve what do I want? What do I even want? So, I'd say this is probably, one of, if not the most important episode we've ever done, and it's episode 199.
Well, there's only three answers to that question, right? To build or not to build. It's a definite yes, it's a definite no, or it's a I don't know, maybe, maybe not. So for all of those answers, you need to be able to explain why. So, and I would add too, James, as my finishing thought, is this is a very strong sort of follow through from last week's episode, which was about building a culture of advancement where everybody can pursue their highest and best use. Well, guess where? That starts at the top too, right? So often at the top of the tree, it's pretty lonely, right? Who do you talk to about this stuff? So this is why picking up the phone, talk to us, start to understand your highest and best use, no matter where you are in your career trajectory from 1 day to 20 years. I mean, I've worked with 20-year brokers who are still stuck in the weeds with this, right? So have that conversation about unpacking your highest and best use, and then unpacking a methodology and a structure and a pathway and the level of support you need to get you there. But it starts with that unpacking at the very start. So You're right. I just highly, highly urge people to pick up the phone, the email, whatever, reach out to us, have a conversation. It's very enlightening.
Very enlightening. Yep. And I imagine, I'll put this out as a final thought. There's probably a lot of people listening to this right now that, have you ever seen that meme, Ash? Listeners, you've probably seen this meme too, where there's the miner and it's two miners and like chipping away underground, and you can see that chipping away, and they've given up inches before they get to the treasure. We've all seen that, right? And underneath there's like the what if they just kept going. There's a lot of brokers out there, listeners, that are more than likely a lot closer to their goals than they think. Like, you know, and that are right now thinking, okay, I'm at this point in the industry. I want to get to Y. Maybe I'm looking at an exit in X years. And there's a whole bunch of people starting to wake up and go hard and a whole bunch of activity. But if they actually looked at it correctly, they could just keep doing what they're doing for another year or two and exit with the same amount of money. Like, so if I was a broker right now, especially those with more experience, 10, 20, you know, years, been in the industry, figuring out how do I make a real go of this, don't just go, oh, I better grow. Like, go back to first principles and fundamental thinking, get our help with it, because I can guarantee you, and guarantee because we see everybody making the mistakes, but I can guarantee you that you're more than likely going to start doing something that's going to shoot yourself in the foot and be a waste of time. So please have a chat with us and we will help you avoid a whole bunch of mistakes and heartache and help you get a bigger payday in a faster amount of time.
I love it, James. And I can assure everybody that, I mean, we've been in the industry a long time, James. Me personally, I was in the delivery room when the industry was born, right? And I can say, hand on heart, to everybody listening to this, there's never been a better time to be in the industry, right? So take this as a super positive. There's huge opportunity, but you've got to understand where you're heading, what your highest and best use is, and why you're going that direction. Once you can get that figured out, there is so much opportunity with this sort of real juncture in the industry that it's now going to emerge out as this massive industry which got a lot of opportunity, but you've got to have your game plan together and you've got to know where you're heading, right? That's really, really important. If you do that, boy, oh boy, are there some exciting opportunities in this industry.
I agree. Yep. Sky's always the limit. Early days. Yeah. Well, thanks, Ash. As I said, this is episode 199. It's probably, we took 199 episodes to get to probably one of the most important topics of all time. So hopefully you've found this valuable. And until next week, stay cool. It's going to be episode 200 next week. So that's pretty cool. Ash, looking forward to seeing you next week for the big 200.
Looking forward to the double ton, James. I might have to bring along a special bottle of whiskey for my collection.
Done deal. All right. Until next week, stay cool. Bye, everybody.